take a couple photos. If it goes out, it's the combination is 588558. You got this? I got this. Bom. Valeu. Okay, well, it's 9 o'clock. I know everyone's not here. I'm glad those of you that are here are here. So welcome to my presentation here. We'll start shortly. I guess we're ready? Yeah? All right. Tick, tick, tick. Some people still coming in. All right, we'll just get started. What do you hear? Yeah, that's one of the most harmonically rich, complex sounds made by nature. Filled with a wide and varied spectrum of frequencies, that's the holy grail for the sound effect recordist, the mythical thunder without rain. But without the word thunder, how do you describe it? To paraphrase the late communications theorist Walter Ong, sound is evanescent. It's here and then gone. We cannot pause sound, cannot put our finger on it, hold it down and put it under a microscope. No sooner does it reach your ears than it disappears. This has made sound an elusive subject of study. Since the advent of the portable tape recorder in the late 1950s, research on sound has exploded. The ability to capture sound with the tape recorder began an era of sound studies that has increased exponentially with the advent of A to D converters, digital recorders, and digital audio workstations. While we cannot pause sound or turn it over in our hands like a physical object, we can all now record it, edit, study its visual representation in waveforms, and instantly alter its character with a host of plugins in the digital audio workstation of your choice. Good morning. My name is Craig Carpenter. I'm that guy holding the boom. That was during the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, Canada. Today, I am a member of the Sonic Production Intelligence Research and Applications Lab at UBC Okanagan in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. Our team is actually composed of two labs, the Meta Creation Lab at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the Spiral Lab housed at Okanagan, UBC Okanagan. We are an interdisciplinary team comprised of computer scientists, musicologists, sound designers, and humanities scholars. We are hoping the Sound Corpus survey will be the first stage in creating the new gold standard in AI and machine learning models to assist and streamline the creative process of sound design and soundscape composition. So I've worked in sound for the better part of the last 2 decades. The more work I do in sound, the more possibility opens. It's a field filled with endless technical and creative possibilities. I've recorded sound effects for film, TV, everything from skateboards, jungles, ferry boats, Doberman pincers, steam trains, and Ferrari engines. Just as the online sound effects library SoundSnap was starting up back in 2007, 2008, I took a short contract with them to enter metadata, tags and descriptions, keywords, etc., for thousands of sound effects they were collecting to build what would soon become the largest sound effects online sound effects libraries in the world. It wasn't until I began work on the Sound Corpus survey that I remembered this sound gig. The Sound Corpus survey is all about collecting descriptions of sound from expert and non-expert sound designers and composers. As my friend Josh likes to remind me, our machine learning models are only as good as our data. So the Sound Corpus survey is all about collecting very specific data to make better models. So data gathered from the survey will help us understand how sound designers hear sound. These days, massive online sound libraries are at once a solution and a problem for the working sound designer. Expanding audio web databases are indeed amazing, but they also demand sound designers to be more creative with their searches. When searching for just the right sounds for a scene, a designer will search with keywords and hope to find the sounds they need. I know from that job with SoundSnap writing descriptions that hand labeling files is a very lengthy process. From the perspective of the sound designer, I also know when audio files are not labeled accurately, the searching for and auditioning of just the right file is a really time-consuming thing to do. And often that throws a wrench into the creative process for the sound designer. So in order to create tools to streamline this aspect of the creative process, we need to better understand how humans perceive sound. Late Canadian composer and scholar Murray Schafer proposed the concept of the soundscape for framing listener-centered studies of sound. The term soundscape is an approach to solving the problem of how humans understand and perceive sound. Schafer and his students from SFU, Simon Fraser, who formed the World Soundscape Project in the 60s, discovered, among other things, that acoustic properties alone fail to account for the human experience of sound. So, to make better production tools, we need to understand not only how most people perceive sound, but how the sound designer hears and works with sound. One of my favorite sound gigs is Foley artist. The Foley artist hears sound differently. They listen for the sound an object makes, not as the object they are, but for what it might represent to support the film's story. So, in other words, a watermelon becomes a human skull, two fingers sliced in a grapefruit become the sound of a flesh wound, a bicycle pump becomes the plunge of a syringe. Foley artists explore sound for sound itself. They are not casual listeners. One of the things my former Foley mentor, Cam, would always say was, they can't replace the Foley artist with a computer. And indeed, Foley remains a very human art form. The most imperceptible subtleties created by the talented Foley artist would certainly be impossible for an algorithm to recreate. Or would they? So, while a computer may not be able to walk like a Foley artist, it can now learn to connect low-level audio features like pitch and loudness with high-level features, or it can understand how a soft creeping step can seem sneaky and support the story. So, in Sonic Experience, Jean-François Agoyard asks, can we define qualitative tools that could be used in conjunction with quantitative ones? Agoyard describes the sonic effect as not a complete concept, but paradigmatic, and thus that allows the quantification of a qualitative analysis. So it's this paradigm of sonic effect that was radically altered and altered our perception of sound. And it was actually Pierre Schaeffer, who is pictured here, yet another French composer, and his concept of l'objet sonore that framed a new way of listening by focusing attention on the qualities of the sound irrespective of its source. He named this reduced listening. So I'm making this connection here that understanding reduced listening and its correlations enables both humans and computers to quantify qualitative data. So a popular example of the quantification of qualitative data in computing is James Russell's circumplex model of affect. So this model quantifies qualitative data such as words to describe human emotion. So if you could look on the XY axis, he's sad and depressed and these things. So what it does is that axis of arousal and valence allows computer models to actually quantify qualitative data. And so this is used in Spiral's own audio metaphor, which I hope you're all going to enjoy learning about this week. So far, our labs have created 2 models that quantify qualitative data using high-level descriptors. So the BF segmenter, and that which predicts sound classes for background and foreground and background, and foreground without background, etc., and affect prediction, which uses Russell's model of affect. All right, so yet another French sound theorist, Michel Chion, proposed 3 listening modes that would be useful to us to consider for creative strategies. And so these, I argue, are all used by the sound designer, and I'd just like to review them briefly here. So the first one's casual listening, and so, which is probably what you're all doing right now, listening casually. The most common, it consists of listening to a sound in order to gather information on its cause or source. So when the cause is visible, sound provides supplementary information about it. This is the most easily influenced and deceptive mode of listening, says Chion. And think back to the Foley artist when I say that, right? That's what the Foley artist is doing. He's understanding that he's deceiving, or he or she is deceiving you, or they, as it were. But yeah, so the second one, semantic listening, as that which refers to a code of language to interpret a message. This, of course, is a highly studied field and highly complex. One critical finding is that it's purely differential. So you're understanding my words right now simply between the difference of their phonemes, right? And also the third one here, as mentioned, Pierre Schaeffer gave the name reduced listening to the listening mode that focuses on the traits of the sound itself. Again, reduced listening takes the sound, verbal, played on an instrument, noises, whatever, as itself, the object to be observed instead of a vehicle for something else. And so all of this is to say that this is a paradigm of how sound is perceived, and it leads me to the sound design cognitive model. In order to develop tools to assist in the sound design process, we need not only understand how sound is perceived by humans, but how it's used in the sound design process. So Foley artists, BG editors, sound effects editors, dialogue editors, and sound designers in general have an ear trained to hear through all 3 listening modes. They must be both good at they must be great reduced listeners, know how a sound is heard casually by the average listener in order to trick their minds and support the story. So I don't know if you're fans of Apocalypse Now in this room, but one reason Francis Ford Coppola gave Walter Murch the credit of sound designer for Apocalypse Now was he recognized the creative power the sound design had on the story. That's what's become known as the Murchian chopper. And I think today we'd actually define that as destructive sound design. So what Murch did is he recorded choppers, he broke those sounds down into their component parts, and he synthesized the chopper. And if you're fans of Apocalypse Now, you might remember that scene with Charlie Sheen laying on his bed and the fan going, and you hear that, And of course, he's used it as a motif. It's brilliant, right? And he's supported the story, and he was given a credit of sound designer, and that's, of course, Mon Oncle Antoine, notwithstanding the first sound designer. So this brings me to sort of my key comparison with this whole presentation, which is between sound designers and computers. So we look at reduced listening and low-level description. How exactly do we model engines to listen like Foley artists and sound designers? To those with trained ears, the croak of a frog is not simply a frog croak. I recorded this last week on the Sunshine Coast. It was insane. There was like 1 million frogs. It was just beautiful. And it's actually recorded in ambisonic, but we don't have that ability right now. But to a sound designer, it's a myriad of ascending and descending frequencies. The sound designer hears new ways of combining these familiar sounds. So, oh, hold on. There it is. So I was thinking, I took the sound of the frog and I slowed it down. And often what's done in sound effects editing is you take a sound like this, and if you're going to design, say, a sound of a monster or an alien, that could be a really good layer, And so a good sound designer, aware of it or not, has trained their ears to be good reduced listeners and to correlate low-level features such as loudness and pitch with the more emotive, human or high-level features such as happy, thrilling, intense, calming, etc. So through the advent of machine learning models, tools are now being created with amazing human-like qualities of perception. So you could see here, we take these low-level features, whether, whatever they are, pitch, whatever spectral energies, the machine learning model connects them with the high-level features, and we're making machines that listen, hopefully like sound designers. Right now, Essentia's use of high-level descriptors have yielded some pretty powerful tools. Their machine learning models are fairly accurate now, and they correlate low-level and high-level features to identify and retrieve danceability, genre, rhythm, singer, etc. So, horrible beats. Maybe that'll help wake you guys up. Maybe not. Okay. So this newfound machine learning ability to interpolate low-level and high-level descriptors are used in database retrieval engines, generative systems like our own audio metaphor, and music streaming and recommender systems. So bridging the gap. The current feature set and state-of-the-art fall short of being able to fully describe the sound design process. We believe this gap is a lack of accurate high-level descriptors and machine learning models designed to correlate low-level features with more accurate and acute high-level descriptors. So enter Sound Corpus Survey 1.0. Intended to be the first comprehensive study of experts and beginning sound designers, the ultimate goal of the study is to improve generative audio event retrieval models. This first iteration of the Sound Corpus study asked people with sound design experience to listen to 10 sound events out of a possible 100, and in a word or two describe the character of the sound and the feeling the sound gives them. So, ideally, the survey reveals how sound experts correlate low-level with high-level features. So here's an example of a question, and I hope I'll show you the QR code again. I'd really appreciate it if some of you would actually do the survey. So you listen to a recording such as, and here are some of the responses we got. One person thought that was peaceful. That was the feeling they got from that. Or they described the character as approaching, growing larger. Someone else called that organic and synthetic. Drony, reverberant was another description of its character, while enticing and exciting was another one. And then ominous, purposeful, impactful. So you could see how those responses, they're actually quite different, right? So, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the survey's 100 sound events were selected using Google's audio set taxonomy. We chose this taxonomy for its greater diversity of categories related to listener perspective. Compared to Schaefer, and that's Murray Schaefer, not Pierre, his taxonomy designed for soundscapes, or Microsoft's meant for VR, Google's audio set suited the survey as it organizes sound events in a hierarchy that includes a full range of sound and context, and you could see there how it works. And in here you can see how our 100 selected sound events for the survey are divided among the various categories. As AudioSet's taxonomy is developed to cover the widest range of acoustic detection by listeners, the qualitative data generated by the survey should yield a lexicon of human sound descriptors to help us better understand how humans and sound designers experience sound. And I see that I'm going close to time here, and I'm just going to go over quickly. So we've got about 100 responses so far since we started the survey. It's yielded 409 unique character descriptors, 487 emotion tags. And what we've done is we've done an extensive literature review as well, and we've combined high-level descriptors from the literature review with the survey. And you could see here the survey results to date. This word-to-vec model visualization shows all our character descriptors in blue and emotion descriptors in red. Here we see how they related to each other in the physical space. We can see some preliminary analysis with this tool as it shows, for example, how at times wildly different some people responded to the same sounds. So what's next? Modeling high-level features. Next steps are to tag, at least this is what my supervisor Miles plans and says we're going to do next, and I just have to believe him because I'm a humanities student first and foremost. So we're going to tag 10,000 audio files with this high-level descriptor data, and then we're going to create the gold standard in audio machine learning models, or at least that's the hope. So, and what will this do? It's going to provide sound search systems with highly acute machine listening abilities. We're going to develop the next level of music recommender systems and computational assistive sound design tools. At least that's what's happening, and it's happening pretty quickly. And so I'm just going to wrap up my talk here by returning full circle and going back to a very famous sound designer and to talk about how he searches for sound. And so Randy Tom, a mentor of mine and the current director of sound at Skywalker Sound, speaks of searching for sound using emotional descriptors. I thought of Gu's keynote yesterday when I read Tom's reasoning for this search strategy. You know, when he says, "How does this make you feel?" And, you know, Tom explains many of his most successful library searches are done by using keywords that describe feelings, right? So using words like scary, funny, sad, cute, and weird, he says he often discovers sounds that would never have occurred to me. And so sound design's a subjective art form. Using emotionally descriptive keywords can lead searches to sounds that can be extremely useful elements for designing multi-layered effects that Tom calls storytelling powerhouse. And so one anecdote that Tom gives is, do you guys know that sound? Right, it gives me the willies, right? You hear that sound? And so Tom also didn't like this sound, and when the director of The Right Stuff asked Tom, I want these rocket engines to be really unsettling, right? He thought, well, I'm going to layer in the nails on a chalkboard into it. And so listen to the result here. I think we can play this. I think it's just up here.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
So you could hear the chalk, maybe some of you could hear the nails on the chalkboard layered in there. Of course, as viewers, you're not going to hear that or think about it. But now that you know, you might. But unconsciously, it might give you that same feeling, unsettling feeling that it gave Randy Tom. So I'm just going to leave you with these thoughts today. This is the old adage that's often attributed to communication theorist Marshall McLuhan. We shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. So that's something as a digital humanities student I've been considering closely. Why? I want to put the human before the digital. When I type a sentence into Google and it completes it for me, I find that irksome. And emotion prediction, natural language processing, machine learning, neural networks, algorithm, AI, it's a veritable swamp of ethical conundrums. And somehow we all need to treat it with respect. The speed at which all of us here are evolving these tools indeed seems like lightning. As we build these tools, let's consider how difficult thunder is to describe. Let's be deliberate. Let's be conscious. Let's remember, why not? Let's remember what Heidegger wrote on technology. The essence of technology is by no means anything technological. And there are some references, and I look forward to connecting with you all, possibly, or some of you in person, and please don't hesitate to get in touch. What would be great is if you guys could capture that QR code and do the survey and get us some more of this good data that we need to make better models. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I hope you're nice and fresh. Know that some stuff happened last night, so go see his installation. I think that would be really, really nice. This is also the place where the concert tomorrow is going to happen. So, maybe you can just check both at the same time. But yeah, it's not just here. You probably want to go there as well. Anyway, just wanted to say that. So I think we're going for paper session number 3, and the chair for the session is going to be Stefania Serafin.
Good morning, everybody. So, like yesterday, please make sure that you present for 5 minutes, not more, and then we will go out and look at the posters. So we have a little change of program. So the first person presenting is a little bit late with the poster. so he will be the last. So we are starting the first presentation with the paper entitled FPGA Accelerated Real-Time Audio in Pure Data. And the paper is by Clemens Weiner, Max Neupert, and Sebastian Stang. So please.
Maybe that's better? Ah, yeah, okay. So I'm Clemens Wegner, I'm working for Bauhaus University Weimar, and I'm also part of the Center for Haptic Audio Interaction Research, and I will speak about FPGA, Accelerated Real-Time Audio in Pure Data. So, how does that work? We were researching exciter resonator systems, and we wanted to have an embedded system to calculate the resonators, basically to do physical models, and it should have been high performance, low cost. There should be no fan at all, and it should be flexible in some ways for routing and interfacing. And after brainstorming, we thought we would need actually something like this. So you have an ARM core here, running Pure Data. So this is kind of an example Pure Data patch that we imagined that does some interfacing. Then there is an FPGA that does the heavy lifting in the middle, and then maybe you had additional effects and some sound output on the ARM again. And this is what we actually implemented. We used an entry-level FPGA board that has a SOC system on it. So there's an ARM core and an FPGA on the same die. There's a dual ARM core at 800 megahertz and an FPGA with multipliers and some on-chip RAM. And we also needed an additional sound card because there was none on this board. So what we needed to do is also to instantiate some of the sound hardware on the FPGA side to be able to input and output sound. And of course, the FPGA should have the DSP subsystem that does the audio computations. And as you can see in this figure, we are using the on-chip memory to instantiate buffers there. And on these buffers will be filled from the Linux side running Pure Data and will be so written and read back by Linux. The buffer transfer speed was not an issue for us. That was sufficient for our case. Here you can see again there's the different buffers on the FPGA side for parameters for audio input and output, and there's some address remapping happening, but I won't go into the details of that here. So this is a timing diagram of the buffers. You can see the top line is the CPU buffers, so that's the buffers inside Pure Data. And with 64 samples, you get a new buffer every 1.33 milliseconds in this example. And those buffers will be sent to the FPGA. Then there is some processing time there, and they will be sent back in the next time slot, so 1.33 milliseconds later. And you can see it, this introduces another block length of delay. And you can also see that the maximum processing time for the FPGA would be 1.33 milliseconds. So that's the maximum time we can give it to calculate. But that was just theory. In practice, we were running into some problems because we were using that operating system, right? So that does some load balancing. It gives some other tasks priority maybe. So only at some point in time, Pure Data will have time to process its samples, and at another point in time, another program would run its processes. So what happens actually is that the buffers won't get scheduled nicely every 1.33 milliseconds, but they would shoot in bursts. and there would be no time for the FPGA at all to calculate something. So that was a problem that we solved by using the sleep grain parameter in pure data. That allowed us basically to reschedule these things to be neatly organized in every 1.33 milliseconds. So that that influenced how we could load the FPGA. So here you see in the different colors the different sleep grain sizes, and with the small sleep grain size of 10 microseconds in red that you can see, we were able to exchange buffers as small as 16 samples with the FPGA. So send them there and send them back. And the total system delay was quite small, at least enough for our application. So we were at 4.36 milliseconds total delay from input to output. And here's a small example for the physical modeling system that we used. Yes? Okay, so if you have questions, ask me at the poster sessions for that.
So, second presentation is entitled Designing Interactive Sonifications for the Exploration of Dense Phrase Edges, and it is given by Andreas Bersland. And please, I will tell you when you have 1 minute left, okay? Thank you very much. Oh, and you should.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, designing interactive sonification for the exploration of dense phrase edges. Okay. So this is a project about interactive dance and making the movements from a dancers through the use of sensors into some kind of musical feedback, which in turn will affect the dancer's movement. I did not use any projection slides, text, graphics, etc. In this project, so that's not so relevant. My collaborator was choreographer and dancer Se-Yoon Kim from South Korea, and we would have weekly sessions where she would try out and give feedback, and we would discuss the directions for the further work. So the reason for my interest in these edges was the way in which stillness is used actively often in a lot of interactive dance performances. So we see that in between the movement phrases, the dancers stop. And maybe this is to highlight the interactive nature of the performance, or perhaps also to make the phrases more musical. Anyway, these beginnings and endings are also related to the perceptual phenomenon of salience, which can play a part in segmentation both for dance and music. And as we know, it's related to contrasts in different features, and is often also something that capture our attention. So for instance, if we have a sound and visual event happening together, the sound can make us attend to the visual event in what's called auditory capture. So these were the sensors applied in this project, so IMU sensors and Myo armbands. And I will just quickly show you the setup, and this is also the software setup where Max was used for some sensor pre-processing, and the sonifications instruments were developed in Cabbage, wrapper for C-Sound, and VST plugins running within a Reaper. So the first sonification was aiming to make abrupt onsets with sharp transients from small finger and hand movements using the Myo sensor. And it was also designed to let a sustained portion of the sound follow these very sharp onsets. So this increased the audiovisual salience and gave them a heightened focus of these small movements. The second one was aiming to combine low and high salience. So sort of the baseline was aiming to have a sort of imperceptible onsets and endings through a carpet of sound that when the dancer was moving slowly, she would bring out the sound gradually. The high salience was based on a saliency model, a computational model called rarity index, and it would generate these sudden bursts of spectral arpeggiated sounds. The final one aimed at achieving a rich and complex varied sonification with two types of endings. The first one was a sudden muting of a sound, and the second was an accent sound, an impulse resonance type, and both were triggered using a sort of flick, sudden type of movement. So the conclusion was that these onset and endings points, and giving them salience, they can make the phrase structure clearer and easier to remember. High salience edges can be applied to focus on small movements, and low temporal salience can contribute to high orientation towards the present or an out-of-time experience. And muting is perhaps less effective to create high salience ending. So welcome to my poster to maybe see some demos, videos, and have any questions. Thank you.
Next presentation is entitled Effect of Using Individually Simulated HRTFs on the Outcome of Tournament Selection Procedures in a Virtual Environment. And please, Mike. So the paper is by Michael Hurler, Min Woon, Marlon Reiner, and Mauricio da Costa.
Thank you. Yeah, Michael. Oh, yes, the microphone. Thank you. Yes, my name is Michael Ora. I'm from the Music Technology and Digital Musicology Lab at Osnabrück University. And I'm talking about the effect of using individually simulated HRTFs on the outcome of tournament selection procedures in a virtual environment. Well, the background is that individualized head-related transfer functions play an increasingly important role in the field of virtual acoustics and in VR audio, as can be seen in many different studies and papers done in the last years. But the central question is how exactly is this individual fit realized best? There are several reviews using different acoustic measurement methods or different simulation methods. What we wanted to do in this area is that we're going to take a practical and everyday perspective for procedures for HRTF individualization by, in our case, using a perception-based tournament method. This means what can be used really in everyday life without complicated measurements. And as a second point, using bone conduction headphones that are also suitable, for example, for augmented or mixed reality scenarios where the ears are not obstructed and you can hear what's happening around you without any obstruction. So the objectives of this first exploratory study we did is to analyze the impact of a numerically simulated individual HRTF on the outcome of a tournament task. This means a really simple perceptual task, and at the same time investigate whether this correlates with a performance in a localization task, what is often used to validate the quality of individual HRTFs. What we did was using Mesh to HRTF, this means based on a 3D scan or on 3D scans of the participants to do the numerical HRTF simulations, and after this doing an exploratory perceptual study done in a virtual environment, as can be seen here with a HTC with HTC glasses. And at the same time, this can be seen here using bone conduction headphones. What we also did in another study where we have seen that this works quite well, but we didn't use this with individual simulated HRTFs, what we did in the current study. There were two tasks. The first was the tournament task itself. It was just an urban park scene and a soundscape, what can be seen here from a bird's eye view, where the participants, can be seen here, are inside the scene. They hear car sounds, birds, whatever occurs in that kind of a park scene. And they had to rate always two different HRTFs against each other in terms of, for example, externalization, envelopment, and so on. And at the end of this tournament, one HRTF wins. This winner HRTF is used together with the loser HRTF, with the least rated HRTF, and the individual simulated HRTF in the last localization task in a virtual anechoic environment, also seen here from a bird's eye view. Within this speaker array, they had to rate different sounds, the direction of different sounds, and we want to know if this works, how this works for the different HRTFs. Well, the results at a glance, the numerically simulated individual HRTFs had little influence on the outcome of the tournament task, but the individual HRTFs achieved the best results most of the time in a localization task. We discussed this and doing some follow-up studies, especially to see why it didn't work out in a tournament task like we thought it should be, and results I'm happy to explain at the poster in detail. Thank you.
Next presentation is entitled A Machine Learning Approach for MIDI to Guitar Tablature Conversion. And the presenter will be Maximo Kalakatos Popokostos. No? Not the second one, so Grigoris Bastas. Thank you.
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm going to present you our work, a machine learning approach, MIDI to tablature transcription. So why do we care about tablature transcription? First of all, I need to say that compared to scores, guitar tablatures offer a more active and intimate interconnection with the instrument. They are actually a music notation that string fret sequences are represented instead of abstract pitch or rhythm structure as in scores. So our motivation really here is, first of all, that tablatures are far more easily readable by non-expert musicians, novice guitarists in general. And so there's a need by this community to have many tablatures for whatever song a track they want to reproduce. So it is easily reproducible given some auditory familiarity with the music piece at hand. And the other motivation for us is that there are many music compositions that someone would like to play in the guitar but are not straightforwardly adaptable. And there are just a few of them which have been adapted by humans. And we explore here how can this be done based on the representation of guitar tablature automatically. Okay, so our main objective here is just to convert MIDI to guitar tablature. Yet, even if the music composition at hand is not playable by guitar. So this can break into two separate tasks, which is guitar tablature generation, transcription, considering the pitch known, and also automatic generation of guitar adaptations. The main challenge here, the main difficulty, although not the only one, is that there is no bijection between pitches and fretboard positions. We have to understand this. If we look at the picture right above, it means that same pitches can be played in more than one positions normally in the guitar fretboard. Fretboard is what you see here, what my hands, my fingers are positioned on. Okay, so to achieve this, we employ a two-step method. The first step is where a DNN, a deep neural network, is employed, and this deep neural network produces a first probabilistic, we call it tablature, which is a fuzzy output. It is a matrix for its input, for its tablet, for its MIDI frame. We produce a matrix that indicates the probabilities, let's say, or some scores, better because they don't sum up to one, of which positions on the fretboard are more probable to be played. Yet we need a second step, which is a step algorithm, to actually resolve these first results. So I won't say much about the architecture of the DNN. You can ask more later on the poster session. And here I need to say that we use the DataGP dataset. And what is important to note is that we take under consideration some frames in the past, actually 4 frames in the past. But it is also important to note that we don't process whole sequences of pieces, but batches of these 5 tablature frames, MIDI frames. So what's important here in our results is that we actually augmented our data set in order to also be able to produce adaptations, that is, reduce information from the input. And we saw that this augmented data set used for training gives even better results for not only for the augmented test set, but also for the standard test set. We can talk more about it later. That's it from me.
Thank you. So next presentation is entitled Deep Convolutional Oscillator, Synthesizing Waveforms from Timbral Descriptions, and the presentation is given by Gordon Krekovic.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Krekovic, and I come from Croatia, Zagreb. As the recent developments of deep learning actually led to significant advancements, there are new opportunities for computer music and specifically for sound synthesis. So there are already a lot of solutions based on autoencoders, autoregression models, and also GANs. But here in my work, I wanted actually to focus on replacing one single component of existing synthesis infrastructure. So not designing sound synthesizers with deep neural networks from scratch, but just to substitute one specific component, and that was a wavetable oscillator. So the traditional wavetable oscillator I wanted to replace with a deep learning network that can produce single cycle waveforms. But what is specific for this model is that it can be controlled intuitively, so using Timbral attributes that are more descriptive for users. In order to build such a network, the first step was to select Timbral attributes that were appropriate for this task. Then I had to prepare data sets, design the network architecture, train several models based on the same architecture but with different hyperparameters in order to select the most appropriate one, and then analyze the results of the best model. So regarding Timbral attributes, I actually reviewed a lot of existing papers, a lot of existing research to find those that satisfy two main criteria. So the first one is that they need to convey some kind of acoustical meaning, but for steady and harmonic sounds, which can be obtained with single cycle waveforms. And the second criterion was that it should be possible to calculate those magnitudes of attributes from audio features, so that the labeling process is actually automated. And then this is the result: bright, warm, and rich were selected attributes. For the dataset, I used a famous NSYNT dataset with a lot of single note snippets, and from that dataset I selected all the snippets from one single note, because I wanted for all waveforms to be fixed in length, and then chose random positions within the snippets. Then within the window of this single cycle size, I chose the sample closest to 0, and then chose those parts as if, of course, there is autocorrelation with other, so that there is a steady part of the waveform. I chose those parts for the dataset, and as a result, there was a lot of waveforms in training, validation, and test set, which were separated. So for each waveform, then I calculated audio features and then transformed them to these Timbral magnitudes. Regarding the neural network, it was actually inspired by autoencoders, but with the second part, those are decoders. And here I used convolutional layers, but on the other way. So it's deconvolution in combination with upsampling and convolutional layers. So there were 4 different models validated with validation test, validation data, and these are results. So here you can see mean absolute errors between attributes and features. And attributes are between 0 and 1. So this seems very good. The first model was the best, and then I explored its sonic diversity. So you can learn more about that near my poster. I'm also open to different kinds of collaboration because I'm an independent researcher, and this is just the beginning of research. So I hope that we'll get in touch. Thank you.
Next presentation is entitled Learning Sparse Analytics, Analytic Filters for Piano Transcription, and it is a paper by Frank Vitrovic, Mojtaba Heydari, and Jiawa Duan. Oh, you're here?
Quick. All right, hello everyone. So the title of this work is Learning Sparse Analytic Filters for Piano Transcription. I'm Frank Switkowitz. So in this work, we are proposing a few extensions to the classic filter bank learning approach. And, oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so in this work, we're proposing extensions to the classic filter bank learning approach, and we're employing a complex filter bank learning module as a front end to the task of piano transcription. So in this case, we're replacing the stage where you would compute a MEL spectrogram in a simple piano transcription model. So when it comes to music information retrieval, we all commonly assume that transforms like the STFT or the CQT or whatever else give us the best representation of our audio, especially for machine learning and deep neural networks. But this may not always be the case depending on what task we're working with. So that's kind of the motivation for this work. And it's important to realize that all of these transformations can actually be implemented as complex filter banks with just fixed weights. And that means we can represent these transforms with neural networks. And of course, if we're using neural networks, that means we can fine-tune the weights starting with these transforms, or we can learn the weights from a random initialization. So the classic approach to filter bank learning is to learn complex filters by learning the real and imaginary parts of the filter independently. and then combining the response into a magnitude response using L2 pooling, which is essentially just pooling by taking the L2 norm. We could also just learn real filters, which gives us your standard convolutional layer that most of us are probably familiar with. There's a few pitfalls with these methods. So for one, the filters that you learn are not analytic, usually. And that means they're not shift invariant, and you would need a very small hop size in order to have them be effective. Furthermore, non-analytic filters have energy at negative frequencies, and it's not symmetric here. Another pitfall of this type of approach is that you often learn very noisy filters. There's no localized frequency response for these types of filters, and it's very hard to interpret what these are actually doing or if they have any impact at all. So we propose two techniques to make the classic filter bank learning approach better. So the first one is to only learn the real part of the filters and infer the imaginary parts. And one way to do this is by using the Hilbert transform. And the Hilbert transform gives you the imaginary counterpart to a real signal such that the resulting real plus imaginary constituents construct in a complex analytic filter, which means that it's going to be shift invariant. The second technique proposed is to apply variational dropout as a regularization technique to induce sparsity. And variational dropout is essentially just adding Gaussian noise to the response of your filter bank, but this Gaussian noise has a learned variance that you learn with the filter weights. So for our experiments, we employ this complex filter bank learning module as a front end to the onsets and frames piano transcription model. This is kind of a little bit of an old piano transcription model. We're not attempting to reach the state of the art here. We're just looking to explore the impact of filter bank learning. We train on the Maestro and we train on Maestro and evaluate on Maestro and MAPS, which are very common piano transcription data sets. We experiment with different variations of the filter bank learning module, and we also experiment with different initializations. So not just initializing the filter bank randomly, but also basically pre-training it with the weights from like a variable Q transform or something like that. And we conduct an ablation study too. So this visualization is the frequency response of all of the filters in the filter bank ordered by spectral centroid. So this is what we get when we just use the classic approach with a random initialization. So we can see there's a lot of filters with very noisy frequency responses around the low frequencies. There are some filters that learn very well localized frequency responses. When we use the Hilbert transform variation, we clear up most of the energy at the negative frequencies. There's still a few artifacts, but nothing else really changes. When we apply variational dropout, I'll just switch back and forth between those a few times. You can see a lot of the noise is cleaned up in the lower frequencies, and something else that's interesting is in the top right, we can see that some of our filters have actually learned harmonic responses from a random initialization, which is very interesting. So just looking at the time domain weights of some of these, the filters that aren't very meaningful are very close to 0 rather than being extremely noisy. These are some filters that have well-localized frequency responses. And this is what some of the filters look like that actually learn harmonic profiles, which is pretty neat. And there's a lot more to look at in especially the appendix of my paper, which is on arXiv, and also the poster. But these filter banks don't outperform the standard spectral features, but we do see that when we initialize them randomly, they actually are basically on par with when we initialize them with weights from a standard transform. So I think I'm probably close to time, so I'm going to end it there. This is just a summary. All of the code is available online, and as I said, if you check out the appendix on arXiv, there's tons of filters to look at. So that's it. Thank you.
Next presentation is entitled Redesigning a Piano Roll, a melody input interface that can play microtones with an arbitrary number of keys, and the presenter is Tatsunari Hirai.
Hi, my name is Tatsunori Hirai from Komazawa University, Japan. My research goal is to realize a microtonal music generation method using machine learning. To do this, we need a large amount of microtonal music data, which is currently unavailable. So this work is about proposal of an extension of the piano roll interface that supports input of microtones. Our interface allows to create temperament other than 12 equal temperament. It also allows to mix multiple temperaments within a piano roll. As you know, a piano roll plays an important role in computer music production. However, it is inconvenient for music microtonal input. If you want to input microtonal notes, you have to change the frequencies of notes one by one like this. And it's very time consuming. I know many of you use Max MSP for this kind of task, but most creators can only use piano roll, so we try to extend the piano roll. Our proposed interfaces consist of two modules. One is an interface for creating customized temperament, which is not so new. The second interface is an extension of the piano roll for creating melodies with the customized temperament. So here is the demo. I hope it works. Okay. So this is an example of creating my temperament from scratch. The circle on the left represents 1 octave. By clicking on this circle, note is added to the user's original temperament. Maybe there is no sound. At the bottom is a keyboard for listening to sound. Also, it is possible to directly manipulate the frequency of note. I know it is difficult to create an original temperament from scratch, so there are several templates available, such as 12 equal temperaments and just intonation and so on. So this is 12 equal temperaments and just intonation. And this one is C major pentatonic scales that it is easy to create good melodies. And there is microtonal temperament, such as 31 equal divisions of octave, like this. You can edit from template temperament. If you don't like sound of F, for example, you can manipulate the frequency directly. The key width corresponds to the note interval. Next part is the main part, the extension of piano roll. After creating temperament, a user can create melodies. It's almost the same as the conventional piano roll interface, but the number and frequency of each key differs. I bet you know how to use it. A unique feature of this interface is that you can go back and forth to the temperament creation interface during a melody editing. By doing so, it is possible to mix multiple temperaments. So this is a mixture of temperaments, like this. And there's another function. This is the example of importing external audio file to create temperaments. This is the sound of waves, and it becomes a temperament. You can make a melody from the sound of waves like this. And next one is sound of chicken, and it also becomes a temperament. And that's all for demo. Okay. Finally, one last thing. I was given the opportunity to go on sabbatical next year, and I'm looking for a place to do my research. If you have any offer or suggestion, I would love to hear them. I do have my own budget, all I need is desk and chair and some beer. That's all. Thank you so much. See you at the poster.
next presentation is entitled A Comparison of Pitch Chroma Extraction Algorithm. And the paper is by Miguel Perez Fernandez, Holger Kirchhoff, and Xavier Serra. And Miguel is present.
Hi. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Hi everyone. Well, my name is Miguel Perez, and I am a PhD student at the Pompeu Fabra University in collaboration with the Huawei Research Center in Munich. And the work I'm going to talk about today is a comparison of different chroma pitch extraction algorithms. Oh, okay. That's okay. And if we're going to compare a set of pitch chroma extraction algorithms, the first question that comes to mind is like, what are we expecting from a chroma algorithm? And we can expect mainly two things. First of all, we want, well, I guess the camera here. First of all, we expect that it actually separates the harmonic, the pitch information from the non-pitch information. Like, for example, these drums from here, these sounds from drums. And also to separate what are the harmonics from actually what are the fundamental frequencies that are arising those harmonics. So therefore, we can go from this raw input representation to actually the chromagram that we're expecting. So we can achieve actually this in many different ways. And we decided to give mainly two types of classification. First of all, is like what we call classic chromas, where we take the knowledge that we do have about pitch, about music, and then apply it to go from a low-level representations, such as, for example, a filter band or a CQT, to a more detailed chroma. And then we have D-chromas, where we get rid of the, well, not exactly, but almost, the expert knowledge about music and pitch sensations, and replace it by a neural network. But the question now moves from what do we do here in the neural network side to the end, what kind of data do we use to train our models? And for D-chromas, there are mainly two approaches. First of all, we can use core data sets. And in this case, we have, for example, a C major. The target chroma for that time where the C major is active will be the C, the E, the G, and in general, the pitches present in that core label. And on the other hand, we have multi-pitch chromas, where we just use the scores or the MIDI files, and we make the network learn to representation, the correlation between the input and the expected output. So in our comparison, we actually took mainly two different scenarios. First, we evaluated how accurate were the chromas regarding the polyphony level in the input audio. And so we divided the audio in different sections ranging from 1 up to 6 different concurrent pitches. And we made sure that they were long enough, so actually we have a proper evaluation. And also we tested how the presence of non-tonal elements, such as, for example, drums or noise, which actually pose two different kind of challenges, actually can affect the output of the chroma. So the results, although there are a lot of interesting details here, I don't think I will have time to explain all of them. We have mainly two groups. First of all, we have this set of algorithms here that are performing really well for monophonic pieces or passages, and then perform really bad for higher levels of polyphony. And on the other hand, we have those other algorithms that are actually performing really bad for monophonic sounds and perform really well for more complex chromas, let's say. And we can see that in the non-tonal elements present in experiments, the noise and percussion are actually affecting in different ways to different algorithms. I don't have time to explain those details now, but you are welcome to come by the poster. But the conclusions are that D-chromas have a huge potential, not only because they don't require to change the parameters, such as, for example, how much we should filter the input, etc. And in general, they show to have more accuracy to what we expect from a good chroma. But then we have to take into account others certain aspects when we train our data, such as the variety, not only the timbres, which is the one that first comes to mind, but also the drum noise and the polyphony levels. thanks for your attention, and if you have questions, please come and see me at the poster session.
Thank you. Next presentation is entitled A Robotic Drummer with a Flexible Joint, the Effect of Passive Impedance on Drumming, and it is a paper by Syed Mojtaba Karbazi, Alexander Efsun Jensenius, Rolf Inge Godoy, and Jim Torresen.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and my name is Mojtaba Karbazi from University of Oslo. I'm a PhD student at Ritmo Center, and I'm going to talk about drum robot with some certain specifications, and this paper presented in this conference is most about a preliminary experiment with this robot. So yeah, this is the actually prototype of the robot. The robot has a powerful quasi-direct drive servo motor and a flexible joint with passive springs, which is designed to exploit the rebounding forces of drum membrane and use the dynamical features of the interaction between the robot and the drum. So this study is about looking at the effects of these mechanical characteristics of the robot in some simple drumming tasks. As you can see, the robot is designed with several parts, and the parts are 3D printed, and the gripper has passive springs to use the rebounding forces. In the experiment, we just designed a simple setup to change some control parameters in the movement of the robot, like the amplitude of the movement on the frequency, and see how these parameters will change the drumming output of the robot's performance. Yeah, we recorded the sound of the drumming and extracted some rhythmic features and tried to look at some patterns in the data we collected. In the data we collected, there are some repetitive patterns that can be seen. For example, this is a part of the data set, and you might recognize some repetitive patterns in the clusters of the drum strokes. For example, the double strokes and the single strokes are completely distinguishable in this dataset, and we are going to use this dataset to train the robot and design an intelligent algorithm for the robot to learn drumming. To mention some main points about these results we got, we can say that there are some limitations in the drumming roles with this certain mechanical design. For example, the fixed stiffness of the spring affects the frequency of the drum rolls and the double stroke rolls, and it makes these limitations in the setup. And the main goal is to use all these constraints and all these limitations to exploit the dynamical features of the robot. So yeah, if you want to see some videos of the robot and talk to me more about the drum robot, just find me in the poster. Thank you.
Next presentation is entitled Constructive Accumulation, a look at self-organizing strategies for aggregating temporal events along the rhythm-timbre continuum, and it is a presentation by Nolan Lem.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot. My name's Nolan Lem. I'm a PhD student and artist at the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics at Stanford University. And so, yeah, today I'll be talking to you about my paper, Constructive Accumulation, which is a paradigm I've kind of like created to describe processes in which concurrent rhythmic events or sound sources converge over time. So this can mean a lot of different things, and it can describe everything from insect swarms, stridulations, a couple of metronomes, musical interaction. So it's, you know, obviously a broad, encompassing term that is also described by other types of terminology. I'm using this as a way to talk about an installation that I'm doing, so I'm trying not to talk too much so I can show documentation of that. So the motivation for this is pretty much the creation of these kinds of dynamical models, dynamical systems, approaches to creating rhythmic events or kind of timbral sound mass. And so you know, there's obviously a history of doing this in microsound. There's this sound texture, sound mass generation kinds of paradigms as well. So what does this mean as far as I'm applying it? I'm creating generative models using coupled oscillators in different ways. So here what you're seeing is a circle map representation of these types of algorithms. And the easiest way to talk about it is to think about a single point moving about a circle that's like a metronome, let's say. And so I'm kind of exploring this idea of a metronome cocktail party effect and tuning these coupled metronomes in different ways to create kinds of unusual rhythmic structures. Using different types of approaches in like dynamical system modeling and also like music cognition. So one of those areas of my research is in psychoacoustics. So we've been studying pretty much where emerges the beat percept in these types of systems. So obviously, if you just have a bunch of metronomes on a table at different tempos, it just sounds kind of like noise and it's crazy. Then if we start to couple them a little bit more and a little bit more, we start to hear a beat emerge at some point. So this is something that I've been studying in my other research in kind of sensory motor synchronization. So I kind of use similar algorithms in this piece and in other pieces of mine. And so I pretty much in the paper detailed 3 different types of these self-organizing coupled oscillator systems. And so there's 2 on the 2 left are 2 different types of pulse coupling, and I'm not going to talk about the dynamics because it'll be much easier to read about in the paper and for reasons of time. And then one style of continuous coupling called Chromato style oscillation. And, oh, I didn't really talk, oh yeah, okay, doesn't matter. How much time do I have? Okay, and so to pretty much create this composition, I did numeric simulations to determine the parameters for these different types of systems, and then I applied this to this installation that I'm about to show. I'm not going to talk about these kind of modeling effects either, for reasons of time. So I'm going to show this piece which pretty much uses all these different types of ratchets that are stand-ins for metronomes. So hopefully this is a lot of material that I'm throwing at you, but then it will become more apparent when I show this piece. How do I link this? I did not create a link for this, I guess. Is there a special? I guess there is no link. So you can just brilliant. So here, yeah, I have 19 different ratchets, and they pretty much make a little click every time. And so I'm using these algorithms to accumulate these sonic events over time in different ways. And these different algorithms have different dynamical behaviors associated with them. Yeah, for more information on any of this stuff, feel free to come by my poster and talk to me. Okay, thank you.
Is Telemachos back? Oh, nice. So the next presentation will be the last of this session, and it is entitled Kinesthesis, Designing of an Interactive Voice Software for Theater Performance. And the paper is by Telemachos Moussas, Natalia Kasani, and Anastasia Georgaki.
Good morning.
Where is it? Double. Yep.
Okay, is it in there? And then just copy paste.
There are links.
Okay, yes. So my name is Telemachos Moussas, and I represent the Laboratory of Music Acoustics and Technology of the Music Department of the National and Kapodistria University of Athens. And I'm here to present the Kinesthesis, that is an interactive voice software for intertextual improvisation in theater performance. We will talk about the architecture, the Kinect, the processing, the parts, and the performance that was applied, the system was applied. We present Kinesthesis, that is a novel human-centered gestural system for vocal improvisation to be used in new opera and musical theater, and we demonstrate the relationship between music composition, gesture, and programming. Our aim is to expand and enrich the tools of both the drama actor and the composer, and Kinesthesis can also extend the sonic palette via the exploration of non-human vocalization, as you will see in a short video. The parts is a wireless microphone to capture the voice of the performer, an external sound card, a computer, and the Kinect sensor. We have the microphone, the pads, the processing pads, and we use MaxMSP pads that we programmed. The Kinect. Here is a code. Here is our pads. And we used it in a theater performance for 21 performances that happened last summer. And the actor was enthusiastic about the system. What we do is he was using hand gestures in an XYZ axis to control the above sound parameters in real time. In coordinate X for the volume, coordinate Y for the pitch, 4 octaves, and Z for the percentage of the effect. In this specific case, we've used a reverse delay. Here is the actor. And this is the tool. We'll see a short video. What can we do with the tool? Can you help me? Yeah. I also already copied. Thank you. Changing the pitch and the volume. Here you can see the parameters of every axis. Making kind of bird sounds. And creating soundscapes. Okay, let's go back to the paper. Roman? Oh, thank you. How will we go back? Okay. So, this is the performer. He was wearing a traditional costume. Kinesis is on stage. And the perspectives is to replace Kinect with MediaPipe. MediaPipe is an open source framework used for media processing, and we will have more opportunities to control more parameters. We can talk in the poster session. Thank you.
So, this concludes the presentations. Please go talk to all the presenters outside and come back at 11:30 for the keynote of Jan Olaray.
Thank you, Stefania. Just before you guys go, I want to say just two things. So, we had this problem with the Zoom session. Just a quick reminder, if you go on the Google Drive, you all have the link. And if you double click on Zoom, right? Then people uploaded their Zoom links, okay? So, and I'm talking to the people online here, so if you want to chat with the presenters, you want to follow these links and not the ones that are on the website. We removed the ones on the website, but please do that. One last thing that I want to say is that, because I'm not really sure if people are going to stay here the whole day, so we made the critical decision that the banquet tomorrow will be outside because the weather is going to be good. It might be a little bit cold later at night, so like make sure to bring a jacket, okay? Because we'll go straight from the last session to the banquet, okay? So you're not gonna have time to go back to your hotel. So like if you leave at the middle of the day or something like that today, like just make sure that tomorrow you bring a jacket, okay? Thank you.